Today we're going to do a little bit more of an in-depth explanation / exposition of the trait Holy Trinity. YouTube does not push my videos, or pretty much anybody's. Even if you're subscribed and hit bell notification, you actually have to go to my channel manually yourself to find the videos and watch them. So if you like what you're seeing here, the information that I provide, the philosophical essays, the cerebral content, the book reviews, etc., you're going to have to manually go to my YouTube channel and find the videos. I post new videos every day, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for the video essays in particular. Welcome to day 275 until I'm a YouTube millionaire. So the trait Holy Trinity, as I explicated in a previous video, is intelligence, conscientiousness, and morality. Now, any one of these traits by themselves in copious quantities isn't necessarily going to get you very far. But if you have one or more than one trait in a particular person, then you have some potential there. But if you have intelligence and conscientiousness without morality, morality is a non-negotiable, then it's entirely useless. Intelligence and conscientiousness produces a person such as, potentially, George Soros, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, or Klaus Schwab. Those people who really have it out for humanity and want to destroy us. So morality is a non-negotiable. Conscientiousness is somewhat negotiable, because though it does have a genetic component, it at the same time can be trained pretty significantly. And then intelligence is not something you can change. So therefore, as long as a group or an individual has a certain threshold of intelligence, then it's good enough. But we're talking about the trait Holy Trinity in terms of producing a veritable superhuman. So if you want to be considered that, we determine this based upon standard deviations away from the norm. So for intelligence, based upon a classical IQ test, a standard deviation is 15 IQ points. And believe it or not, the global IQ average is not 100. It's actually about 89.5, because the tests have not been properly set up for the global average of intelligence. It's set up primarily for Caucasians, and Caucasians end up being right at 100, 98 to 102, but you get my point. So therefore, the global average is about 89.5. So anything above this is an intelligence that is sought after, is good, all right? Now, it doesn't mean that it's completely barring you from having children or whatnot if you're below this. It happens, you know? It's just not all of us have super high intelligences. Same with conscientiousness. Now, like I said, conscientiousness it does have a genetic component, but it is trainable. And morality is trainable as well. But when it comes to morality, this has to be really set before a couple decides that they're going to have children. If their morality is set properly prior to that, and they at least have an average morality, then it's okay. So let's say that somebody has an IQ of 145, 3 standard deviations above the norm, a conscientiousness that is 3 times higher than the normal person. And so the way standard deviations work, a single standard deviation does not mean that you're twice as competent as somebody else. It just means that you are in a certain percentile. So 1 standard deviation puts you above 85% of the population, okay? 115 IQ does not mean that you are twice as intelligent as somebody with an IQ of 100. It means that you're about 15 to 20% more mentally clear than they are. That's about it. It's not twice as much. But for sake of argument, because we don't have any more clear definitions for how to filter out conscientiousness and morality and determine them, we're just going to say that, a person with a conscientiousness score of 3 would be 3 times as capable, and same with morality. So this person, 3 intelligence, 3 conscientiousness, 3 morality. Now, because this person has all 3 traits in the trait Holy Trinity above 1, that means what you do is you take each of those numbers and you multiply them and add them to 2, which is the replacement rate of the population. So 3 times 3 times 3 is 9 times 3, 27. So that means that such an individual would be well suited having 30 plus children. Okay? Somebody with 145 IQ, building businesses left and right because they've got such a high conscientiousness and they're faithful Christians, as an example. Now, to that point, when it comes to morality, something that's very hard to gauge, since it is so hard to gauge, I propose that what one could do is use a morality Holy Trinity of individuals to give a score for somebody's morality. So such an individual would have to interview with a Catholic priest, a Stoic philosopher, and a Zen Buddhist monk. And the Zen Buddhist monk, after getting a feel for them, would give them a score based upon their morality, which is below average, average, or above average for their specific set of moral codes. All right. So a Catholic priest, let's say that a Christian goes to them and talks to them and said, your faith is above average, so you get a score of 2. If your faith is average, you get a score of 1. And if your faith is below average, you don't get a score of 0, you get a score of -1. And then when it comes to the Stoicism, right, you do the same thing, and same with the Buddhist monk. Now, this is just a posited potential morality Holy Trinity, okay? So Buddhism, Catholicism, and Stoicism. You got a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of a way of life, and a little bit of a religion. And you could determine based upon that. If you get a morality that is, because you add these 3 numbers up, you don't multiply them, you add them up. So let's say a Catholic priest gives you a 2, a monk gives you a 1, and a Stoic gives you a 1. So that's a 4, right? So if you have a 4, that's positive. Now, if one person gives you a -1, the other person gives you a -1, and the other person gives you a 1, that's a net -1, and your morality is below average. Therefore, it doesn't matter how high your intelligence or conscientiousness is, because morality is entirely non-negotiable. You have to have at least an average morality. So you say here, with a -1 morality score, a person would be well suited having no more than 2 children. Replace their own line and give their future descendants a chance to fix that moral problem. So you're not completely cutting them off and doing a eugenics thing, but you are saying you got a chance to fix it, but you're not going any farther than that. Now, of course, this is just I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying this is something that is hard, fast, we have to do it. So if it's a negative number or 0, then it's a no-go. But if it's a positive number, then you can take all 3 of the Holy Trinity traits and multiply them together to get the number of children. And to get the number of children, because a replacement rate of 2 children is essentially a standard deviation in terms of number of children that a couple is going to have. So if you have 4 children, for instance, that's 1 standard deviation above the average, which is 2, or what the average should be. That means you're in the 85th percentile. So 4 children, right? That means that each standard deviation is an extra 2 children. So an intelligence of 7 standard deviations above the norm, means that you would go 7 times 2 plus 2. So 14 plus 2 is 16 children based upon purely intelligence, if conscientiousness and morality are acceptable. Conscientiousness can go below 0 and it's not going to hamper you too much, but morality is totally non-negotiable. Totally non-negotiable. So maybe what you could do, if you get a conscientiousness below 0 and a morality that's average, you could take your intelligence and then you actually subtract the conscientiousness from it, and that gives you your total number of children you should have. So say you have an intelligence of 4 and a conscientiousness of -1 and a morality of 1, so your average morality. You take intelligence, so 4 minus 1, which is conscientiousness, gives you 3 standard deviations above the norm, so you get 2 plus 3, not plus 3 times 2, because the conscientiousness is below 0. Now, if it were 0 or 1, then you would go 3 plus 2 times 2, or 3 times 2, whatever it is, right? Which would give you, instead of 5 children, would give you 8. That's a way to compromise for a lack of conscientiousness. So a low level of conscientiousness, you just don't multiply by 2. And then for morality, if you have anything below 0, it's a no-go. And then intelligence is what it is. If you're below intelligence or the average intelligence, but you have a high conscientiousness and a high morality, then perhaps you can do the same thing. Instead of being completely non-negotiable, you just subtract the numbers as opposed to multiplying them and whatnot. So say your morality is 3, your conscientiousness is 3, and your intelligence is -1. You would go 3 plus 3 minus 1 gives you, 5 plus 2. So you would go 5 plus 2 as opposed to 3 times 3 minus 1. And that would be, or 3 times 2 minus 1. That makes sense. I think that's a good compromise. So let's say that somebody has an intelligence, or a couple has an intelligence that is 7 standard deviations above the norm, 5 standard deviations of morality above the norm, and 5 standard deviations of conscientiousness above the norm. Because all 3 are positive, and all 3 are significantly above, you don't add up these standard deviations, you multiply them. This gives even more emphasis to such a superhuman, so that that superhuman will have lots and lots and lots of kids. So it goes 7 times 5 times 5 equals 175 children. The person, the couple, would be well suited having 175 or more children. Now again, this is just a hypothetical. I'm just throwing this out there because we don't want to do eugenics necessarily, where we're taking out and unaliving people just because they lack intelligence, or they might have Down syndrome or something. That's not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is give incentive to those who have very high capacities. So rather than taxing people with low intelligence, for example, if we want to look at this in terms of money, we instead give a tax credit to those with high levels of intelligence, conscientiousness, and morality. So we're doing a positive incentive as opposed to a negative incentive. And that's much healthier and safer than some of the other stuff that we've done in the past. I think it's much more moral too. You know, who are we to decide as human beings with limited and ephemeral perspectives on existence that a specific couple is not allowed to have any kids? We're not. We aren't those people. Now, you have China, which did the one-child policy back, previous decades, and that caused a population collapse for them. They should never have done that. But, they're a communist country. We're not communist here. We are a free market, a democratic republic, and it's not something that is going to be centrally ordained necessarily, without it being voted in some way, shape, or form. So this is simply a framework. If there's a cohort of individuals, maybe some group of, like a particular institution that is looking to make super strong human beings, they can look at the way they filter how to reproduce, if their own specific government, like a state government as opposed to a federal government, or a city, or even a little town, or a compound. They can decide how they want to do it within their little compound, right? And this is a framework for them if they want to make superhumans, and a lot of them. Now, all of this flies completely out the window if you have a person who is one of a kind, or a person who is the last of their kind. If you have a person who is the last of their kind, and you want what they are, in other words, they're highly intelligent, conscientious, and moral, they're very good people, and you want them to continue to exist. Let's look at Doctor Who, for example. His home world, Gallifrey, was completely annihilated. The entire population of his people was erased. He saved them later, but that's an example. You would want the Doctor, who everybody loves, to have as many kids as humanly or Time Lordly possible, so that his species doesn't die out. And the Doctor is physiologically compatible with humans. Slightly different, but physiologically compatible. So that means the Doctor can have children with humans. Kind of interesting, huh? That he's considered an alien or an extraterrestrial, but he's physiologically compatible and can have children that have viable offspring that are not sterile with human beings. This is a side note, it's tangential to the conversation, but I still want to bring it up. I think that actually lends credence to the potential that Gallifrey is actually Earth from the future. And Gallifrey is heaven. They're the same thing. And the Doctor, being the Lord President of Gallifrey, heaven, Earth in the future, is God. But anyway, that's a side note. So, yeah, just a basic framework for how this might be done if you want to give positive incentives for intelligent, conscientious, and moral people to have more kids. You can take it for what you want, leave it, doesn't matter. But I just wrote this up yesterday and I figured I'd talk about it. So, yeah, there you go. I have it a little bit more specific in my notebook on how it would actually work, and I haven't worked out all the kinks, but there you go. Alright guys, that's it for today. Love y'all. Peace.